everybody. We're going over the Commander cards that we think are most worth buying for the month of June.
I'm Mia, and I figured out both of our cosplays.
I'm Beezy. I kill all the bugs in the household. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want to squash the bug that is inaccessibility of cards, go to Card Kingdom because they've got everything you could possibly need. And if you get enough stuff in your cart, free shipping.
Card Kingdom is the place where we are using all of the prices from this, so you know that they're having good deals, especially because all of the things that we're saying are most worth buying today. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves of the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, you can save 5% of your Roma tax dollars on your entire order to sleeve your cards and all of your awesome cards into sleeves, including Ruby and Pink Diamond, two of my most recent favorites.
They are heavy standouts at the table. We're also sponsored by Moxfield later, not now. We love them, but you won't know how much until you watch the ad that you won't be able to predict. It's not really a choice because, again, you can't predict it. You'll be middle of the ad before you even realize it. And we have a Patreon if you want to see more nerds, if you want to see more deck techs that are not on YouTube. Hey, head over there, see if you like anything. So you might be wondering what we mean by most worth buying. That just refers to these cards are 100% worth the price they are at right now. We are not trying to move the market. We are not trying to speculate. We have a fun speculation game at the end if you're into that, so stay tuned for that. But this is just, hey, I think you should buy 1, 2, or like 3 copies of these for various decks to play them in because they are that good. They are better than the price they're at right now.
We have had a lot of good luck with these cards, whether we've played them themselves or we've gotten squashed by them against the table, or some mixture of both because they are awesome. The first one is a land. It can go in any deck. It's Urza's Cave at $1.79. Tap to add colorless, or if you pay 3, tap and sack it, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. I like the fact that this doesn't come in tapped for one. Another is it can go into any deck and it immediately taps for mana, and you can get any land for it. That is an amazing tutor. There are so many awesome things that are printed on lands nowadays, whether that be removal effects, ramp, like card draw, etc., that you can find the best land in your deck at any given point, keep this up, and then do it at instant speed before your turn comes around and you can utilize those lands.
The more robust your mana base, the better this card is. And I think the less colors you play, the better this card is, because the more room you have for utility lands. You only really need like 1 or 2 really sweet lands for this card to just be amazing. And it's interesting because this is a budget land. It's very cheap. Very, very cheap. $1.79, I think this card is way better than that. I would pay $5 for this easy. So I feel like I'm kind of getting a steal if I at $1.79. It'll catch up eventually. But if you've got bounce lands that are really critical to like your landfall strategy, if you've got, like a Mosswort Bridge where you want to cheat something out, if you've just got maybe some other cards that we're going to talk about on this list later, you can go find those at instant speed and it's a huge blowout. There's really no downside to Urza's Cave. The only downside is if you're 3+ colors, it hurts a little bit because you, A, don't have as much room for fun lands to go get because this isn't good when you go get a Steam Vents off of it. And B, it's straining your colors because it only makes colorless when you need 3 colors.
I mean, how many times have you been in a game and you've seen a land just take it over completely, and there's not a lot of land destruction that gets removed, like, in Commander to begin with. Obviously, no one's running Armageddon for the most part, but even the ones that say destroy target permanent, like Assassin's Trophy and Generous Gift and that sort of thing, aren't that common, I'd say. As people are phasing out 1-to-1 removal to begin with, I think that it's becoming less and less popular, and a lot of the things are non-land permanent. So when you're finding lands that are very impactful, whether you find a Cabal Coffers, a Nykthos, a 3-tree City if you're in the right deck, these lands can just snowball you to the top very quickly.
Of all the amazing cards in Modern Horizons 3, this is probably one of the ones I play the most. The opportunity cost is so criminally low. If you have not tried this, because there's been a lot of new cards lately, Modern Horizons 3 alone had a bunch of playables you could think about. If you haven't tried this, please go buy, I'm not even kidding, go buy 4 copies and you're not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, you could just cram them into all of your decks if you really need to, if you can afford that colorless land in the beginning, and then just get your best land later in the game. I feel like every single time a game goes a little bit too long, I'm just sitting there and I have a bunch of mana. It's like I've played a lot of my spells. I'm not really sure what to do at that point. Maybe I'm holding up an instant, but maybe that mana is better used to go fetch my best land at a certain point. I love the versatility.
Yeah, I mean, even in that scenario where you're like stalled out and you can't find cards, go get a War Room. Go get something like that and get your cards back. Next is a former Game Changer, current free agent, I guess, Trouble in Pairs, $28 for a 2 white for an enchantment. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, skip it. But really, whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. This can dominate games. I think we were a little bit on the disagree side with should this have been removed from the Game Changers list. It's up in the air. this is a real strong card. You sort of set it down, forget it's even there. You don't have to pay any more mana. You don't have to pay any attention to it. They will just do their thing. They will play the game, and you'll get an insurmountable advantage if this isn't removed.
It is a great card. I feel like when Trouble in Pairs first came out, I was a little bit hesitant on it because 4 mana enchantment doesn't work immediately. It's one of the pitfalls that enchantments can be doing like very well. That's like the Smothering Tides and stuff. And then there's some enchantments that just sit around and it's like, okay, well that sucks.
Yeah,
and
we've seen this before.
Yeah, it's not great. But this one is amazing. I love the fact that it has so many ways that it can trigger, and it doesn't have a limit either. So if in a turn, an opponent attacks you with 2 creatures, draws a second card, and casts a second spell, and then also some people have like a couple cantrips on their end step, you will still be getting all of those like cards from it. That is so many triggers off something that just costs 4 mana.
I think we've both sat there quietly while 2 other players have a counterspell war going, and you're just like, yeah, I'll draw off that. Oh, is that your...
Yes.
No, I'll draw. No, carry on. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to draw a bunch of cards and win the game later. This card gets stronger the higher power you're playing at, and there's no limit to that. This is like one of those maximally powerful cards. If you have a bracket 5 deck, there's a good chance you just play this card in it. But like if you're going to play it in bracket 1, you can do that. But you're going to get less triggers because it's less about double spelling in those, those metas, those games. You're going to get the attack a little bit, but it's also very face up. I know that I could just attack you with one thing or wait and then attack you with 7 things later. That one's the least reliable one. But the more higher of the brackets you go, the easier double spelling and drawing 2 cards is.
See, I'd kind of argue about that. I think that this is good no matter where you're playing it because in lower power levels, you have a lot more turns to work with. You're not ending the game on turn 5, 6, 7, 8. And because of that, it's like, okay, can you afford to attack me with 1 creature? Well, if you're not running Voltron, then I don't know. If you have a token deck, you definitely can't afford to just hit me with a 1/1. I probably have something better sticking around. You have to have these incremental advantages, and usually you have to go within this kind of like clause. I think that because of the way that games play out in the lower brackets and the amount of turns that it takes, this is good no matter what bracket you're sitting at.
Definitely a solid card. I wouldn't cut it from any decks for sure. I think one thing about this card, it's kind of one of the more expensive cards on our list, and $28, but this sits in a weird spot. It's not a booster pack card, really. It's like from the pre-con stuff. So I have no clue when, if at all, in the next 2 years, this thing's going to get reprinted. I think it's come down a little. I wonder if being reduced from the Game Changers list impacted the price a tiny bit. But this does feel like a very fair price. And I could just see this in a year going to 35, and I think it is that good. So I want to pick it up, even though it theoretically could go lower. I don't feel bad about buying it at 28, and that's all about what this series is.
Yeah, it's about whether it's X amount of dollars good. This is $28 good.
For sure.
I'm running it in CEDH. I've seen it in brackets 3 and 4 too, and it's that good. It takes over games. If you can clone this or you can steal it from someone, it's often a target of that because it's so powerful and it gains so much advantage. This is $28 good. Even if it goes down to $5 tomorrow, I still think it is $28 good.
Then we'll go put it on the most we're buying next month, and we're going to freak out even harder when it's $5. We're going, you have to buy this. Next up, it's a lower budget card. It's Entish Restoration, $3.50 for this uncommon. It's 2 and a green instant, sacrifice a land. Search your library for 2 basics, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead you go get search for 3, and then they go onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is a take on Roiling Regrowth, which was a take on Harrow. How do you feel about it?
I love this card. I play it in Uro. Uro is a 6/6, as you know, and it's very easy to be able to get that 4 or greater trigger. I feel like there's so many creatures that are just naturally powerful, whether you're putting counters on your team, whether they, have some sort of clause for them to be powerful, like the fact that some of them can't attack or block unless you have 7 lands. Uro dies immediately and you have to bring him back, etc., etc. I don't think it's that tough to get that power 4 or greater clause to be met and get those 3 basics. If you're running a lot of basics, I think it's very awesome, and especially because even though they come in tapped, this is an instant speed spell. There are a lot of spells that are running at the 3 mana type that are getting 2 basics, 1 to hand, 1 on the field, but I want them both on the field for 3 mana. And then at that point, I want 3 of them on the field for 3 mana.
Yeah, there's a lot that this card does that I'm pretty happy with. It does put lands in your graveyard, so that sort of Harrow, dredgy, Life from the Loam style play, they're super happy with this card. It works with the big stompy decks because they're just going to play a 4/4 and then go get 3 lands and they're way ahead and they save a lot of mana. Usually I think it's like 6 mana is the going rate to go get 3. But there's also the math that you have to factor in where I spent a land to do this. But when you spend the land, it is not additional cost to cast the spell. So if it were to get countered or something were to happen, that's a corner case, but it's nice that it's just not there. That risk is not there at all. The spell has to resolve for you to sack the land and then go get whatever you're going to get. And it's very, very good for landfall decks. You can create 3 landfall triggers and have a land in your graveyard just for 3 mana.
I mean, I just think this card is very cool. You do need to be running a lot of basics for it. You can't run this in a deck where you only have like 3 basics and hope for the best. But I like the fact that you're not limited to what type of basics you grab. You don't have to grab all of the same type. You can pick and choose as you see fit. And just even if you don't have a creature with power 4 or greater, say someone removes it in response, you're still able to get those 2 lands. It's still a pretty good deal. And I like the fact that it doesn't fizzle the spell like on contact.
Yeah, if you're playing on a budget, this is sort of on the higher end, I think, of what I would want to pay for this kind of ramp spell, because it's not busted. It's not head and shoulders above everything else at 3 mana, but it is very, very solid, and you will see upsides over, like, certainly over Roiling Regrowth. That does justify the small price hike. I think Harrow is probably better than this because it's like 20 cents. So if you're playing like $50 deck, I would do Harrow first, but this is a really good one. If you've got a $100 deck, for example, I would just go for it.
It's very solid. Up next is a red card. It's Curse Mirror at $1.79. 2 red for an artifact. You could tap it to add red. As it enters, you can have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, but it has haste. Where do I begin with this one? I think that you often hear us say, I don't like 3 mana rocks. Completely true.
Guilty.
However, this is a copy of the best thing on the battlefield, including all of your opponent's creatures, until the end of turn, and it has haste. I know I just read that, but that is really impactful. Whether you have a gigantic flyer that, on attack trigger, you get XYZ, you can get that immediately. And then later, it just will turn back into a mana rock and you still have that advantage. A lot of the copies that we see, it's like sacrifices at the beginning of the next end step or whatever. That is a very common line that see, and very, very red. But this just turns into ramp later. I like the fact that you can just copy either your own thing or just go, oh, you have something better? I'll be taking that for a turn.
It does shore up one of the biggest weaknesses of mana rocks, and especially 3 mana rocks, is, hey, it's turn 6. What am I supposed to do with this? Where am I going to find 3 mana to throw down? It's awkward, and mana rocks do fall off as the game goes on a little bit. And 3 mana rocks obviously are just, they fall off harder because they cost more mana, and it feels worse to play them when you need to develop a threat or wipe the board or something. But Curse Mirror is like, no. I almost don't want to play it on turn 3. I almost don't want to ramp into a 5-drop on turn 4. I want to draw this in the mid game, have a very good excuse to play it. Then in the future turns, I have an extra mana, and it feels pretty cool. It's like a weird marriage of a lot of things. And as a bonus for the spikes out there, this has infinite combos. If you throw an Astral Dragon down or cards that sort of make tokens when they enter, it enters as the thing that makes it, and it can go infinite, and you win with your mana rock. That's a nice wrinkle to throw in. There's many decks that are going to play this now and take the 80% upside of, hey, get an ETB, get that sad robot ETB, and then just have another mana rock. And 20% of the time they go, I just win.
Yeah, and it's the fact that they all have haste too. They're with those infinite ETB combos, there's often the part of okay, I have infinite 1/1s. What do I do with it? I can't give them haste right now. So unless I have entering the battlefield, leaving the battlefield triggers, etc., I'm not really sure what to do with them except for, all right, pass, hope you don't have a board wipe. But this, you can just attack immediately. You get those infinite damage triggers or whatever you really have stapled onto it, and you can win. I like the fact that it doesn't make you wait.
Yeah, no awkward waiting. We hate waiting here. We just want instant gratification on everything. Next is a card I think criminally underplayed, criminally underpriced, criminally underrespected.
Yes.
I don't know how many times I have to say it, but I love Flare of Malice, and you should too. It is only $2.79, and this is one of the best removal spells I've ever played in Commander. It is ridiculous. 2 black, instant. You may sacrifice a non-token black creature rather than pay this spell's mana cost, which is very good in black, very easy to do. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the greatest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. There's no secret that we are Soul Shatter stans. We love that card so much. Honestly, this card has been so much better, which just sort of feels like I'm getting away with something when I was already so high on Soul Shatter. It felt like my dirty little secret at first. And now I'm just I tapped out. but you're going to lose now.
It's so easy. Black always wants you to sacrifice things to begin with. It just says non-token. Well, if you're in black, you probably have a lot of disposable things that you want in the graveyard to begin with. That is awesome for this. It goes, okay, 4 mana, don't worry about it, because you'll never be paying that because you're in black anyways. I think that I have gotten people so easily with this card. Just the free spells really get people, and I think that by far this is the best of the Flare of XYZ in that cycle. It's because it's so versatile.
Some of them kind of fizzled out, and I think a lot of players are low on all of them now.
Really?
After except for the white one. I think the white one maybe people are pretty happy with, but I think the rest of them were a little disappointing. Because you like, free cultivate, whoa, and then you're like, I don't know.
I'm not sacking a mana dork for that.
Yeah, I'm not sacking a mana dork for that. You're like, free counterspell, whoa. I don't have any creatures in this deck. I'm playing draw go.
Yeah, I think it's a very dependent one on that one.
Right, but this one, it performed exactly how I loved, and then better. It just outperformed everything. It was so fantastic. It feels like cheating when you just get to go, I have a 3-for-1 in my hand, and it costs no mana. And I'm going to wait until you make a mistake, overextend, mess with me too much, and then I'm going to use it, and I'm going to, in most cases in black, sacrifice something that now maybe creates a dice trigger or is now beneficial for me in some other way. I don't want to hyperbolize really, because that's not a great thing to do. I think everyone who doesn't play any Flare of Malice and has a decent number of decks should just buy 5 of this card, put it in every black deck that's 1 or 2 colors, and I would still consider it in 3s, and just watch yourself profit. Watch how fewer games you lose. It feels like very hard to lose when you have this in your hand. You feel so safe. You're just going to run away with games. It's such a good tempo play. I mean, you're spending 0 mana, and you're removing their most expensive thing for each person.
I'm not going to hyperbolize either, but it is a very good card. I think there are a lot of cases in black where you will want this because it is always a non-token creature. That's pretty important because this thing will always hit the graveyard. That's what's most important to me. So whether you have like a Gravecrawler or a reassembling skeleton in your deck, that you can always get back. Whether you have a Dread Return and you can get something back with the thing that you sacked, I think that there are a lot of cases where you can just keep this up, especially if your commander has like affinity for XYZ or something, where even if you need to sack your commander, you can bring it back very cheaply, like a Dadbod Urza. Affinity for artifacts, maybe you just sack him and then you bring this back because you can cast him very cheaply. Carador, perhaps?
I mean, this card is playable at 4 mana. It would be a solid card. Obviously worse than Soul Shatter, but I think still playable. 3-for-1s are invaluable. And you always have the break glass in case of emergency. I'll sack my commander. I'm under serious fire or something. But like we said, most of the time, black decks can just do this for free without even trying. And when you can get into scenarios where you can like loop this, it really feels like they can't play or win the game when you just feel untouchable. That happens a lot with Flare of Malice. I'm not complaining. I will take those wins.
I am so surprised to see Flare of Malice at the under $3 mark. I thought it was going to rise up there in the 6, 7, 8. It's kind of like Flare Denial and stuff. So to see it at this low, I would highly recommend that you pick it up at this price.
Do it before we hype it up too much, because this is your last chance.
Up next is a card that Beezy likes. I'll read it and then let him talk. It's Nexus of Fate at $9.50. 5 blue for an instant. Take an extra turn after this one. But if this would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, reveal it, shuffle it into its owner's library instead. The fact that it's an instant is crazy, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, I want to shout out the price first. $9.50. That is lower than it's ever really been. It got hit hard with a Mystery Booster 2 reprint, where I think it's in white border now. And it was, $15, $20 because it hadn't gotten a reprint. It barely even got a first print because it was only available as a buy a box promo. So it was hard to get a hold of this. And now that it's like half the price that it used to be, I'm even higher on it. And I want you guys to get it even more because it's so good. You have to be okay with extra turn spells. This is not a bracket 1 card, not a bracket 2 card by default. It also chains itself. So it kind of is like, just by nature of you playing more of the game, Nexus of Fate thins your deck and is still always in your deck, meaning you will cast it more the later the game goes. So there's some incentive to self-mill. And that's one of the reasons I love this card is while extra turn spells are very, very strong all the time, pretty much no matter what, I think 7 mana is pushing it. But the fact that this extra turn spell is a win condition, what do you have to do for it, you might ask? Nothing. You just have to draw a bunch of cards or mill yourself until Nexus of Fate is the only thing left. Because if it's the only thing left, you cast it, it goes back into your deck, you attack, you do whatever thing is profitable for you, and you have infinite turns every turn you will cast Nexus of Fate.
It is very hard to remove this. One of the only ways, maybe the only way to remove it is to exile it, whether that be like on the stack with something like Force of Negation, or
Right.
or you just have one of the ones that's like exile target spell, end the turn, or like something like that. It's very hard to get rid of this card is what I'm saying. So it does have a lot of opportunities to chain itself, whether you can keep tutoring it to the top, whether you can dump your entire deck into your graveyard and just keep casting this, whatever the means really. You'll have 7 mana by that time. You'll go, all right, are we doing this or what? Because I have I have an attacker that can go anywhere. You guys don't have blockers, and I have infinite turns. Do we want to play this out or no? And then they're gonna go no, and your win rate's gonna be better.
This is one of the better extra turn spells in the format, I think, as long as you're discounting like Expropriate and maybe like Time Stretch, where they kind of just win the game and they're not as much of an extra turn, as more of like, okay, we're done here. This is, I think, better than Time Warp. I love the fact that you can hold it up and fire it off and take 2 turns in a row. Anyway, it is one of my favorite cards, even though it's got some toxic play patterns. Nobody wants to get time walked 100 times, so save it for the high power stuff, but it is fantastic there. I love having a win con on my extra turn spell just stapled together. One card that does boost Nexus of Fate is Waterlogged Teachings. If you're playing Dimir, it finds Nexus of Fate, and I've had that come up many times where you cast Nexus of Fate, have enough mana, go to your extra turn, and then you play Waterlogged Teachings for Nexus of Fate, and you're like, can I just shortcut shuffle my library and then hit you for 12 again?
Nexus of Fate is very powerful, and if you want to see where BZ is playing a Nexus of Fate in all of his decks, you should go on Moxfield and check out our profile, because all of the decks that we play and have retired are all on there, and you could type in Nexus of Fate and see exactly where BZ's playing it. Dimir Oscar, if you're wondering.
You will see it in only one deck because I have Restraint.
So far.
I think I'm going to put it in a second deck, but that deck's also going to be not... The goal of that deck is not going to be have a bunch of fun. It's going to be play a very competitive game. So I know your audience with Nexus of Fate and know your audience with Moxfield. Anyone who has a commander deck should be using Moxfield. Let's go into one of the lands that we were alluding to slightly with Urza's Cave. Mia, what do we got?
It's Talon Gates of Madara at $14. When this land enters, up to 1 target creature phases out. You could tap it to add colorless, 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color, or 4 mana, put this card from your hand onto the battlefield. I've got a lot with this in CEDH, and I'm not just putting this on here because I've got with it. I think it's very important that it's on a land that you can tutor pretty instantly with like crop rotation. It's a removal spell. It doesn't have to phase your creatures. It could just phase out anything on the battlefield that's slowing you down or whatever. And then not only do you have to tutor for it if it's in your deck, if you have it in your hand and you have 4 mana, you can just slap it down onto the field and go, whoops, well, were you going to win? Because you need that piece, and I've phased it out already. I think the fact that it's very hard to interact with because it's an ability at that point is so useful at the higher power levels. Also, I know, $14, very, very expensive for a land. It's only been printed once, though, and that was in a precon. So, if we're going by precon rules, like with Trouble in Pairs, I understand why it's expensive, and I don't know when it's going to be printed again.
I think a lot of those are sound investments when you just want to buy a card without fear that it's going to tank. I don't know when Talon Gates is going to get reprinted. It's a weird proper noun, and I think that's on Dominaria somewhere. But this did cool down a little bit. We had our eye on it right when it got spoiled, but I think the pre-order price was crazy on it. And
I think it was like 20 something.
Yeah, I think it's definitely cooled a little bit, and I'm more happy. I've played with it a little bit more. It has a lot of utility. It's really, really good with things like bounce lands. I think even in mid-power, you can get a lot of utility out of this. Hold it up, threaten people. You want to play this with like Walking Atlas and Sakura Tribe Scout, where you are not having to pay the 4 mana. You just go, hey guys, I'm going to keep bouncing this. I'm going to keep threatening it. Maybe even in a pinch, you save your own creature from a board wipe. That probably feels pretty good too.
Honestly, if I could put it in $100 Euro, I would be,
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, sack the land, get it back with like Aftermath Analyst or something like that.
Yeah.
Just keep bringing it back. Oh, all of your stuff is like phased out. If you can loop it enough times, sure, I'll just keep swinging or whatever. I think it's so useful. And the fact that you can just slap it down, that's crazy. You just can't interact with that. I feel like one of the reasons that we love like Otawara and Boseiju and stuff is because all of the channel abilities are channel abilities. They're not spells. You can't counter them. You just have to counter the ability, and that's very hard to do, and we don't see that often. Same thing with Talon Gates. You can't really counter this unless you have the specific like Tails End type effects, and a lot of people aren't running those.
Fun fact, since those lands that we mentioned, Boseiju and Otawara and this are all colorless, they get around protection from any color.
Talon Gates, great card. But up next is another awesome card, and it's a tutor. It's Imperial Recruiter at $10. 2 and a red for a 1/1. When this creature enters, search your library for a creature card with power 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. I thought this card was a lot more genuinely. Maybe it's because I see a lot of the fancy printings and arts of it. I really like this card because it finds a lot of the things that you need, whether that's like Sarah's Ascendant or like Esper's Sentinel. There are a lot of very toolboxy cards in that power 2 or less range.
Yeah, this is a super toolboxy card. I think you probably want to have a glut of creatures in your deck, or at least 6 to 7 super reliable, great targets. If you're one of these blinky value, like white, blue, red, greenish, like that sort of mixture, where you've got like Peregrine Drake and like a Flicker Wisp type cards, where you're just gonna like play Imperial Recruiter and go get something that flickers it and get that value engine rolling, and then start playing stuff, getting an insurmountable amount of advantage. It's probably good with like, you go get a Wood Elves and then you go figure out how to do that again and you flicker them. I like it a lot in those types of strategies. Sometimes I think when you just use it once, it can feel a little mediocre. But if you get something like Esper Sentinel and then it draws you 2 cards, you feel a lot better.
And hey, if you're playing in those blinky decks and you're trying to just rush for the win, you can always find Thoracle if you're playing at that power level.
I suppose you could. I don't know if a deck wants Imperial Recruiter and
I think you
Thoracle.
have the option. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying you have the option.
You sure can. We sure do mention Thoracle a lot on this non-CDH channel, but it's a fun one to talk about sometimes. I think one of the things maybe that's more common that I will see alongside Imperial Recruiter that's very spicy, but not necessarily bracket 5, is Kiki Jiki. You can just go find Kiki Jiki with the Imperial Recruiter. Then you play Kiki Jiki, tap it, copy the Imperial Recruiter, go get your other thing, which is like Village Bellringer or something like that. And now you have infinite stuff.
Yeah, usually you find these in very spicy decks, but if you do just have a lot of little guys, you could throw this into a not so combo-y deck too. Maybe you just want to find the best little guy that you have.
Yeah, I have a mono red, sort of like aggro, it's assertive, and it has a lot of those good stuff cards, and I'm not playing this right now, but it's very possible that I just should put it in.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many cards that, you're not paying with you're paying with the stat line, right? So they're 1/1s or 2/2s, but they have this great effect stapled onto them, whether it be ETV or continuous or whatever. And this will find them pretty easily because of the fact that it's like, okay, well, they don't have, big swords or big butts, but they're paying with their heart and their stat, and not their stat line.
Yeah, this might be at its best in either the nonsense flicker decks or when you're finding some kind of very impactful 5-drop that's going to win the game. Karmic Guide, Peregrine Drake, Kiki Jiki, that kind of thing, where they're all just going to loop and combo with each other. That's a good move. Though next we have to move to, I don't know, I say this card's frustrating sometimes. I'm never upset with it, but sometimes this card is such a power outlier in the decks where if you're ever playing against a wheel deck or a discard deck or a group slug deck, you just roll your eyes a little bit instinctively when they play Waste Not. It's $4.50 right now, which, hey, that's pretty cheap. It's 1 and a black enchantment. Whenever opponent discards a creature card, you get a 2/2 zombie. Discards a land card, you get 2 black. And whenever they discard a non-creature, non-land card, you draw a card. It's a little played out, right? It's a very strong, very reliable card. Recently reprinted in the Wilds of Eldraine. Hasn't really crept up past then, but this is a linchpin of all those decks, and it makes it so that the game is kind of just on easy mode, which for you, the player of the wheels, that's exactly what you want. You play a wheel and you draw 12 cards and you get 12 black mana and you get 12 2/2s.
It's so powerful and so impactful. Bone Miser went up pretty recently, but when you're wheeling everybody, this is such a great piece to that puzzle too. I think that there's so many people who are also playing just like wheel effects in their not wheel decks. For instance, every precon that comes with Windfall, everyone who wants to slap in Wheel of Misfortune. I feel like there are a lot of those types because Rakdos, there's a lot of wheels in them. And then as the wheel player yourself, if you have this and people are just discarding stuff to begin with, the Oscar decks of the world, for instance, I think there's a lot of, discard draw filter type things that you can get value out of this so long as you can also get people to discard. Because I feel like there's a fair amount of discard built into people's decks to begin with at times.
Yeah, that's never going to move the needle on whether you should play Waste Not or not, but it's something to note that when you have Waste Not, sometimes you just play it as long as you're not worried about it dying, or if you have removal or backup or something, counterspell, that you're going to catch some strays on someone channeling something, or you go, oh, cool, actually, I make 2 mana there. It's like just something to keep track of. It makes all the Burglar Rat little one-off type effects better. Waste Not, whether you're trying to restrict everybody down to 0 cards with Turgid or Tiny Bones, or you want to give everybody 1,000 cards with Nekusar, it makes it so that it just turns your good turn into a storm turn, and it really fuels itself and kind of ends things, which is why I'm so surprised that this card, which is head and shoulders above every other payoff, like a Megrim or something like that, or even Nekusar, the Ping version, like the Underworld Dreams. So far above that. I am more scared of this than like anything. The only thing that I'm more scared of than Waste Not in a wheel deck is Smothering Tide. But you don't see that. I only have to see that when she plays her 4-color Nekusar-esque deck. But Waste Not is number one aside from that.
I think that it's very interesting too because like a lot of wheels are at that 3-mana type, whether you're playing Windfall or Wheel of Fortune or whatever. And so this is like the turn 2, turn 3 combo where you're just like, oh wow, I have a lot more than you on turn 3. I think Waste Not is just very scary. It definitely is one of the best cards in those decks. And I'm surprised to see it's not as high as I thought it would be because Nekusar is one of the most popular commanders. I just thought that this would be a little bit higher because of that. Maybe it just doesn't have as many homes because Turgid is, one of those commanders that rule zeros itself out of the conversation to begin with. But Nekusar is so high on that list.
Yeah, I'm telling you right now, this thing's going to creep back up. There's going to be some new fun Group Slug commander or some new Group Hug-esque, wheel and deal type commander, and this card's going to go back up to $10. I promise that's exactly where it's going to be. I'm never going to feel bad spending $4.50 on Waste Not at all. We're going to go to another card that is also $4.50. This is Staff of the Storyteller. Keep in mind, there is a secret layer printing of this coming soon, but this is 1 and a white artifact. When it enters, you get a 1/1. When you create a token, you get a story counter on it, and you can remove a story counter and pay 1 white and tap it to draw a card. Not a fan of the design of this card because it just checks off all the boxes by itself. But as a Magic player who wants to resolve spells and win the game, that's a pretty great recipe for having a good card do stuff in your deck.
There's so many white weenie type, create a creature token, XYZ. And the fact that, this pays itself off immediately. It's a great turn 2. You could get consistent card draw from it all the time. It's so great. And as we mentioned earlier, there is a secret layer printing, but that usually doesn't move the needle too much because of the fact that secret layer printings, there's only XYZ amount of those secret layers running around, and I don't really see this getting reprinted in our main set. There's only been one real print of this, and it was, I think, March of Machine Commander. It was a precon card, and so we're not seeing this that often, but that doesn't make it a bad card. It's a great card.
Yeah, I make a lot of finance shorts where I just talk about, hey, what's spiking lately? And it's always some precon card from 4 years ago that everybody forgot about and nobody has any of because it's not in booster packs. And that's the type of thing that I look out for with Staff of the Storyteller. But worst case scenario, just keep this in the back of your head. Wait till the secret layer comes out. If it goes lower, scoop up even more of them if you want. If it doesn't go lower, hey, I told you so, but you can still buy it at the same price.
It is a great card. We've played with it a lot, and I love making tokens. BZ has a deck that makes tokens.
I think most people do.
Yeah, well, creature tokens. I love spitting out creature tokens.
I mean, I play Field of the Dead and everything, so I pretty much all my decks make creature tokens, so I could kind of just play Staff of the Storyteller in anything. But if you want to know what decks to play Staff of the Storyteller is in, go buy 4 Staff of the Storytellers from Card Kingdom, our sponsor. We love them. If you use the link in the description, that lets them know that we sent you and helps us keep our lights on and run more of the show you love. And then you'll have a bunch of Staff of the Storytellers.
Also, at the Card Kingdom link, you see our faces and some of our picks of our favorite cards. And that's pretty cool. I like being on their website. Go check it out.
We're also on your website, Card Kingdom.
Yes, we are. Up next is a recently unbanned card from the entire Commander format as a whole. It's Gifts Ungiven at $12. 3 and a blue for an instant. Search your library for up to 4 cards with different names and reveal them. Target opponent chooses 2 of those cards. Put those chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand. Then shuffle. There's a few points about this. One of them says up to 4 cards. If you want 2 cards in your graveyard, you just find 2 cards and they're forced to put them into your graveyard. So it's just one of those tutors. And then the rest of the time, it's just, wow, these are 4 awesome cards. And then the entire table has to kind of deliberate. We saw this pretty recently in our Playing with Power gameplay. Yep. You should go check that out. And Def Cat goes and finds like the 1 ring in Rhystic Study and 2 other very good cards. And we're like, well, we can't let you have the 1 ring in Rhystic Study, but we're still forced to give you very good cards out of it.
This card plays out fantastically because, like Mia said, if you want card advantage, if that's the thing you really need, make no mistake, this is a tutor. Go find 4 card advantage pieces. 2 of them go in your hand, guaranteed. There are obviously a bunch of like games you can play with finding less than 4 cards, sticking them into your graveyard, flashback spells, or finding certain copies of spells that you want and then throwing a Snapcaster Mage in the mix, where now it's a redundant piece of all of the other cards you grab, so they have no choice but to give you something like that of what you want. Go find Flare of Malice, and even if you tap out for Gifts Ungiven, you can still cast Flare of Malice right away, and that feels really, really good. So Gifts Ungiven has a lot going for it. Didn't want to talk about it until kind of, what has been like at least a month since it came out, because the price was all over the place. This thing, I'm sure, was like $30 right away, and then it dropped down. And I think now it is cooled. I really don't see it getting reprinted in the next year. So $12 feels like it's the lowest it'll be. And hey, this card is way better than $12. Trust me, it is very fantastic. And it doesn't really matter what your deck's doing. I think you could jam this into most blue decks, which was kind of why it was banned in the first place. But I do agree with the decision to bring it off. It just makes it one of the better blue cards in the format.
We all like tutors, don't get me wrong. And tutoring 4 cards, and especially if you're like, I have a recursion spell in my hand, so I can go get that back. You know, I wanted more cards in my graveyard anyways. Like, you know, I'm gonna go find the best thing, or it's just straight up, I'm going to put 2 cards in my graveyard. You don't have a choice about that. I really like the flexibility of this card too.
My one tip, if you're like, hey, BZ and Mia, that's really cool, I'm gonna go buy a Gifts Ungiven and play it. My one tip, my PSA, is if you think you're going to cast Gifts Ungiven pretty soon, just know what you're going to get. Pull up Moxfield and, you know, scroll through your deck so you don't have to physically search it. So you have that in your head in advance. It just saves time because it can be tedious to search for 4 cards. But other than that, the card's great. It's all gravy.
Not the ad. We just wanted to tell you that Moxfield's a really great place.
It's a great way to look through your deck for tutors, honestly. That's what I do. Next up, Prosperous Partnership, a card I haven't talked about much on this channel, but I love it. $4.50. It's a common price tag today. 1 red, white for an enchantment. When it enters, you get 2 1/1s. Thanks, Prosperous Partnership. But weirdly, even though it's like a marriage going on, or I don't know, a business agreement, you need to tap 3 untapped creatures. I don't know where that other guy comes from, but that makes a treasure token. So now we have an engine where all we have to do is play more dudes, we leave them untapped, and then at the end step before our turn, we tap all of them in multiples of 3 to make treasures.
I mean, the fact of it giving you the first 2 creatures to begin with is kind of nutty. That is very good value. And there's so many ways to make a bunch of little creatures within the white-red archetypes, whether you're doing like Call the Coppercoats or you're doing like the Grand Crescendos of the world. There are a lot of ways, and then you could just tap them all. There's no timing restriction for it either. You make a bunch of dudes, they all come in untapped, and you go, okay, I'll also refund some of the mana that I spent on that too.
This is a secret must-kill threat, I think. When I've had this out, and players don't answer it, I feel like I'm sneaky. I feel like I'm getting away with something because I'm like, okay, guys, end step, make 2 treasures, untap, play 3 more creatures. I haven't used any of my treasures. Pass, stockpile more treasures, and lead up to that huge, gigantic turn where you bury them or you play some big overrun, and they go, what could we have done to stop this? Well, maybe stop my mana engine.
Especially if you have something like either token doublers, which are very, very prominent in these type of token decks, or you have something like Academy Manufactor, where you're just not only getting treasures out of tapping your creatures, but foos and clues too. If you have the O'Hare Talks of the world or the new Elspeth, you could just be getting a lot of value out of this, no matter which kind of route you're going with tokens.
And since we seem to be doing this today, if you want to go infinite with Prosperous Partnership, you can. You need some way to make the treasure tokens into creatures. So Ginny Faye is a really good way to do that. And then if you start doubling, where you're tapping 3 creature tokens to make 3 treasures that turn into creatures, there's other ways to do that. Sometimes you can get like your artifacts to become creatures. There's a couple ways, but I think Ginny Faye is one of the better ways. You just go, hey guys, I assembled a bunch of cards that I was going to play anyway. I'll make 1 million hasty cats and kill you.
And I feel like if you're doing stuff like that, there are so many things in those token making decks that just ping on ETB, whether you're doing like the Agate Instigators of the world, or you could sack them to deal damage or something like that. You're going to be able to kill the table even if it's not by combat damage too.
Yeah, and with Ginny Faye, you get the haste token, so they actually just die. Speaking of, if you want to stop that stuff that we just talked about, if that doesn't sound good to you, if it doesn't hit right, if that's not your style, then your style has to involve Massacre Worm. $1.79, 3 black, 6/5. ETB, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. And whenever one of those creatures that they control dies, the controller loses 2 life. If you don't play the tokens, then you want to beat the tokens.
Man, this card is really cool. I play this in Yarok, which is already very nasty. But even if you just reanimate it or something, it only hits your opponent's creatures. Yes, they can have a big token board, but you get 1 proc off of this, and then you still have that static of when their stuff dies, they lose 2 life. Now they're going to have to answer this before they start going on like a sacrificing spree, like a lot of, like Rakdos decks do or something like that. But, the Flare of Malices of the world or whatever. Or they're going to be getting hit, and that life really adds up at a certain point. And if you can just blink this in the same turn, giving all of your opponent's creatures -4/-4 basically just wipes the board for that. And then you're going to be getting a lot of triggers to their face.
I feel like I owe Massacre Worm an apology. I think I was like so dismissive of it for a couple years, and I was low on it, and I just went, it's 6 mana. My 6-drop slot is pretty taxed. But I just have gained nothing but respect for it. Maybe there's even more little idiots now that I want to get off the field than there was 5 years ago. That's probably true to some extent. But it just has consistently destroyed me. And I've played it a little bit now, and I'm consistently loving to see it in my hand. When they go crazy with a ham sandwich and Scoot Swarm, you have an answer to that. And sometimes if they go wide enough, you just kill them. And it doesn't matter that the static ability remains because they just lose. They have 20 creatures in play that are 2/2s. They're all dead. You take 40.
This card is awesome, and I know I'm happy you've gained respect for it because I've played this in Yarok, and you've just almost scooped immediately. Like, do you just want to go to the next game? And especially if you're not in a budget deck, you can be pairing this with the recently reprinted Meat Hook Massacre or something like that. If you just want to give a little bit of the extra -X to all the creatures and get a little bit more of those dies triggers too.
Yeah, Massacre, deserving of a seat at the table, deserving of a consideration for your precious 6-drop slot. It does pull its weight. And really what sells me on it the most is $1.79. This is your top end. This can win games. This has a very relevant static ability in addition to a useful ETB trigger that comes along with part of that static. And it's just, you can't beat the price that this is. It's so reasonably priced. It's such a good deal for a less than $2 card.
It's always a very big threat. Up next is another budget card. It's $1, and it's Garruk's Uprising. 2 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw a card. Creatures you control have trample. Whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater enters, you draw a card. The line, creatures you control have trample, is one of the most impactful lines that I see in the low to mid bracket games. Genuinely.
Yeah, for real. It's very relevant, and I think that this card has a nice it wraps everything up in a nice bow. I have not loved Elemental Bond or Garruk's Pack Leader in the past. Those are the ones that trigger on 3 or less and they don't do anything else. This, I think what helps it, even though the requirement's a little steeper, it's power 4 instead of power 3. But when you play it, even if you draw it later, it just checks what you have out and you can still get a card back, which to me changes the math on this totally. It makes it from like potentially a little bit of a dud later to, oh, okay, replaces itself. Let's keep going. Let's see what I can find next. Sometimes you draw into another creature you can play, and then you draw. Whereas, you play Elemental Bond and you go, okay, see you next turn. But this, I think Garruk's Uprising has more of that chain ability, and the trample, you can't understate it. I think there's not a ton of ways to give trample to your team that don't feel bad. There's like aggressive mammoth. I don't know. I don't want to play that card really.
I feel like also in the budget games, there are so many ways to just make 4/4s because budget games usually go a little longer or it's more expensive or whatever. But if you're in budget green, you're probably playing like Azuri's Predation. You're getting a ton of cards in this. If you're probably playing like Rampaging Baloths if you're in Landfall, that hits the 4/4. Maybe you're playing something where you make 3/3s and then you're playing something like, I don't know, Tribute to the World Tree. That works, right? Because it puts counters on stuff.
If you're making 3/3s that enter with a counter, you're good to go.
Yeah, there's just ways to make sure it gets to 4. And I think that with the trample too, it's like, okay, you got big boys. What if they have a bunch of 1/1s? Don't worry, we've already figured that out for you. Maybe you don't need cards. Maybe you just need to swing in. That's fine. We've got you.
And it's just a great dollar. It's a great dollar card. It's never going to be too expensive. It has crept up in the past to like $2.50 or $3, but I've loved playing this in almost every green budget deck that I have. It's up there in the staple territory, I think, for me, at least when I'm building $50s and $100 decks.
I think so, too. I think it's very good in that range.
But we do get to have a little bit of fun at the end. If you want to know, we say don't speculate. Maybe you can speculate a little. We like to play a little speculation game every month where we buy five, not 5,000, 5 cards so to add some stakes to us needing to compete over very trivial, funny things.
I'm just going to say this real quick. 5 copies doesn't move the market, and I just want to tell you that real quick. 5 copies for each of us. We're not market movers. We're just gamblers at best.
We're lightly gambling. So tell us about how the money you've gained or lost on your last month's spec, and then tell us what this month's spec is and why.
Sure, I'd love to. I lost $6 on my spec last month. It was Craterhoof Behemoth. I bought it at like 20-ish, 21. It's down to 15. Great buy, by the way. If you need one, you should go pick it up.
Even more so.
It's just a really good card. But I am playing the long game for this. I didn't think it would go down that much. However, Craterhoof was a $40 to $50 card prior. I don't think it'll reach that in the next year. I think it's better than $15 worth, though. I think it's better than $20 worth, and I can see it going to 30 or so. easily, especially if people figure out something in standard or something with it, because it's already a very good,
You know, this is about this month's spec too. What did you spec on this month?
No, I'm just explaining it to them.
They understand.
Okay. This month is Dreamtide Whale. It's $2.29, and it's for Modern Horizons 3. This has been a powerhouse in my Poison deck. It's been a powerhouse in the Commander Cube. We had to take it out, and it is very, very cheap. It also is just a gigantic body, comes down very cheaply, and with the Titus Precon encounters being thrown around everywhere, it's very easy for players to cast their second spell and getting that proliferate to make your team huge.
I think that's going to be a big factor to whether this thing moves. I think, we've seen the initial kick of especially the Ishtola and the Titus Precons, or Titus? I think it might be Titus, moving the market, but on random singles that are older from Precons. But there might be a second wave of that when the Precons actually come out. And I think Dreamtime Whale has a shot. So my last spec, I'm down $1.50, which sucks, but Mia got hit a little harder, so I can't complain that much. And my spec is kind of going off the rails a little bit. I'm going on for a reserve list card. I'm going for Grim Feast. This is $4.99, and it says when your opponent's creatures die, you gain life equal to their toughness. I sort of initially was looking for more effects, ways to gain life in my Belladros deck, and since I already had Meat Hook, and I mostly just play Meat Hook as, maybe you give -1 or 2, but you play for the static. When their stuff dies, I gain life, and now I can't be stopped. This is way better than that. You don't get the other words. I'm not comparing it. But for life gain, this can gain you so much life. And when I saw it was on the reserve list and I needed a copy anyway, I'm like, let me just buy 5.
Yeah, I think it is very safe to spec on reserve list cards for the far future. Maybe not the near future, but far, I think it's awesome. But if you want to see any more speculation game, you should check out last month's Most Worth Buying right here.
Crater Hoof's on there.